Dibrig tú go díon nó chánig tú go dtí an chathair seo, fuair his neart taithí agus d'urbar de chud scileanna. I ngacháte éigean tú, fecinn tú rud éige na chabhraigh tú a thógáil, ach inis tá tú ag féchant ar an todhchaí, agus beidir go bhfuil tú ag smaoinemh ar an áit as a dagan tú. In éireann, tastaíonn pleanálathe, siúnéirí, ploméirí, díanadóirí, inaltóirí, altíirí, banistóirí láithreáin agus níos móhain. Tastaíonn túhain, le do chud scileanna agus taithí go léir, chun cabhrúlinn na mílte tithe a thógáil. Tá an domhan tóga agat, a níos tar arás agus tógan teach a thóg tú. Tuile eolais ag gov.ie/Building Ireland. Teachtareacht ó rialtas na hÉireann.
This episode is brought to you by Paranormal Playback, a new podcast where hosts Shar, Mel and Laura recap the spooky and entertaining world of paranormal reality TV. Each week they take a fresh look at popular shows like Ghost Adventures and Kindred Spirits, blending humour with insight as they pull apart what's happening on screen. The three of them are a mix of believers and skeptics, which makes for really fun conversations, sometimes leaning into mystery, other times asking the questions viewers might be thinking themselves. With their background in creative production, they know how these shows are put together, so they're great at pointing out the moments that feel real versus the ones that might be more for the cameras. And their segment, This Old Haunt, digs into the true crime side of paranormal investigations, separating fact from fiction. With Halloween coming up, it's the perfect time to add something spooky, funny and a little addictive to your playlist. For even more spooky, ghostly, paranormal content with a humorous spin, go check out Paranormal Playback. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Scary. I'm your host Will, and each week I narrate your real life paranormal experiences as well as some famous paranormal cases along the way. As always, before we get into this week's episode, I want to say a special thank you to our new Patreon subscribers who are Ali, Alberto and the Teddy Bear, Amy Mounds, Claire Gladden and Beth Tycody. Honestly, thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon. It literally is a one-man band here. And if this is something you're interested in, you can find the link in this episode's show notes, or simply go to patreon.com/scaryaparanormalpodcast, where you can gain access to ad-free main episodes and exclusive scary episodes. But now, let's get into our next paranormal encounter. Let me start by saying I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal. I have a background in law enforcement, so I believe in what I can see, which would be facts, logic, and reasonable explanations. But with that said, I have had an experience for you that I simply cannot explain. This happened back in the mid to late 2000s. At that time I was working in retail in a suburb of Birmingham. I'd been in retail for a good few years by then, and like anyone in that line of work, you pick up certain habits, some good, some not so good. The shop itself was a 2-story shop. The ground floor was the main sales area. Out the back there was a stock room, there was a kitchen and a toilet. There was also a set of concrete stairs that went up to the first floor with a dogleg turn in the middle. From the top of the stairs you couldn't see all the way down to the stock room. When I first started there, I was a sales assistant, but in time I became the manager. I guess you could say I got to know the building really well. One of my bad habits was showing up hours before anyone else, unpaid, just so I could get a head start on the paperwork. That often left me sitting alone in the makeshift office for hours before the shop opened. Going back to the office, I suppose the word office is being a bit generous. It was really just a concrete cupboard with a thick, heavy door. When I started, it had shelving all around the walls, but eventually we took down most of that and made it into a little workspace, and it worked pretty well. There was a desk chair, even room for a seat or two if there was an interview or a chat. One day while I was working, a man came into the store. He was probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. I soon noticed that instead of browsing stock, he seemed more interested in the building itself. He was looking at the walls, checking out the layout, the way things had been set up. Eventually I asked if he needed any help, and he said no. He was just looking at what we'd done to the place. He ended up telling me that he remembered it from years ago when the shop was a toy shop. That would have been sometime around the 1940s. And I guess that caught my attention, so I asked him if he knew why the cupboard at the back had such thick walls and such a heavy door. And without hesitation, he said that's where they stored the fireworks. And then he added, yeah, it's a shame what happened there. There was a fire and the owner's 2 little boys died trapped inside. And just like that, he left. Up until that point, I had never felt anything strange in the store. I'd never heard or seen anything unusual. Even when I was there at all hours of the night and morning, the place always felt normal. So I took it as just a tragic story. Maybe he had the wrong shop, or maybe he was spinning me a tale, I don't know. So a few months pass, and one day the same man came back. This time he had a book with him, borrowed from the local library. He opened it up on the cash desk and showed me a black and white photo of the store when it was, in fact, a toy shop. The shop front was unmistakable. That confirmed, I guess, at least part of his story. Still, nothing about that made me feel uneasy. It was just an interesting, if tragic, bit of history. But then one night, I had my first strange experience. I was cashing up on the first floor alone. Everyone else was still downstairs closing up. Behind me was a door that led to the back stairs. Those stairs were solid concrete, narrow, and the sound of footsteps always echoed through them. Suddenly I heard running. Heavy footsteps rushing up the stairs, pretty fast. And I smiled to myself, thinking it was one of the guys downstairs sneaking up to play a prank on me. So I opened the door and stood halfway between the stairwell and the sales floor, waiting to catch them in the act. The footsteps grew louder, closer, right to the dog leg in the stairs. But no one appeared. I waited a moment, feeling confused. I knew those sounds. I'd worked in that building long enough to recognise every creak and echo. It wasn't just my imagination. So I phoned downstairs to ask if anyone had been on the back stairs, and they swore no one had. it didn't really sit right with me. The second experience came much later, and I can't really say exactly when. I was in really early one morning preparing for a big promotion that the shop was having, and part of that promotion involved blowing up helium balloons. I inflated about 30 of them and stored them in the kitchen next to the office, where the ceiling was low enough to keep them within reach. After that, I sat at my desk with a cup of tea and I started working on my paperwork. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. A single balloon ribbon was drifting into the office, and I turned and watched. The ribbon was coming first, trailing out in front of the balloon as if someone were pulling it along. It wasn't bobbing randomly, it was moving with purpose. And I watched as the balloon dipped low to clear the doorway, skimmed the floor, and then floated up until it stopped dead in front of my face, perfectly level, perfectly still. I just sat there staring at it, and eventually I flicked it away, and only then did it behave like a normal balloon drifting up to the ceiling again. I checked it, no leaks, no damage, nothing that I could see that would make it act in that way, and I just put it back with the others. None of the other balloons moved, only that one. That was the last unusual thing that happened to me in the store. I stayed there for years afterwards and often spent nights in the building, but I never saw or heard anything again. I never saw the man with the book either. And while some people I worked with vaguely remembered the store being a furniture store, no one else ever mentioned it being a toy shop. I honestly don't know what to make of it, but it happened, and I can't explain it. Thank you to Anonymous for sending in their experience. And now let's get into our next. I thought I would share my mum's experiences. I would have been about 12 when I first heard these stories, and each story happened about 20 years apart and involved sighting full and vivid apparitions, both unexplainable. The first happened in 1992, or around about then. I grew up in a mill town near Manchester, and one day my mum, who was a childminder, had taken me and my brother and his friend, all little kids at the time, to a local park to, I suppose, keep us entertained for a bit. I was young enough to be still in a pushchair and I can't recall any of this. And my brother and his mate, both a couple of years older, were walking next to us. We were leaving the park via one of the entrances, which is adjacent to an old 18th or 19th century mill. And as we came out of the park and onto the pavement outside of the building, my mum noticed a group of people hanging around outside the entrance. One of the group was an old man who was sitting on the steps, and he was with two young lads, maybe about 12ish, who were standing playing a game with a large coin, flipping it onto the pavement. She said that she noticed straight away that all three were very odd, dressed as though they had stepped right out of another century, maybe Victorian or a bit later. But as she described it, the kids were like they were out of Oliver Twist. She said they wore dirty trousers, shirts and black boots. One had a flat cap on, the other no cap but with tufty light brown hair. The old man was in a long coat and a hat with a brim, holding a walking stick. Another detail which sticks in her mind is that the coin which the boys were playing with seemed to be larger and heavier looking than a modern day coin, and completely filthy. She said that the two lads were blocking the pavement, but they both acknowledged her, politely stopped their game and moved aside to let her pass. As she did so, one gave her a smile, which revealed a mouthful of dirty brown teeth. She said she walked past him with the pram, my brother and his mate, and as anyone would do at such a strange sight, she did a double take, glancing back to look at them again, but when she did, they had vanished. She says that it wouldn't have been possible for this group to move out of sight in the seconds it had taken her to turn around for another look at them, particularly the elderly gentleman who was sitting down. She didn't ask my brother or his friend if they had seen them, as she knew the whole thing was just very odd. But she did say that us kids didn't seem to have noticed anything, and she didn't want to freak us out, being a respected childminder and all that. A weird thing about this was that it was summertime when it happened, and it was a hot and sunny day, which I always thought made it more unusual to have seen these ghosts in broad daylight for some reason. The mill was in the process of being renovated and converted into modern day offices at the time, and workmen were inside knocking the place to pieces, and it's her belief that whoever or whatever she saw might have come out to get some peace and quiet and to enjoy the sunshine. Unfortunately, none of us kids can recall seeing anything, as we were all so young at the time. Mum is a bit of a no-nonsense person who I really couldn't see making up something like this, and she still swears by the story. So I do believe that she saw something. She says that she wasn't afraid at the time, and the memory of it doesn't scare her now. Her other encounter, which happened over 20 years earlier, is somewhat more eerie. Mum grew up in a seaside town on the coast of North Wales. Her father was a local milkman, and when she was about 10 years old, she used to go along sometimes with him to help on his rounds. So this would have been around the 1970s. On one occasion, she was out on the rounds helping with the weekly cash collections. So she knocked at one house where a customer, an elderly woman, had recently passed away to collect the final bit of cash that was owed. A relative of the customer opened the door, and whilst counting out the coins, my mum could see past them into the hall and up the stairs. Mum said that she noticed an elderly woman slowly making her way down the stairs towards them in her dressing gown. And the woman making her way down the stairs was the customer who had recently passed away. She said she didn't mention it to the relative or hang around for an explanation. She took the coins and quickly left, no doubt completely confused and perhaps terrified by what she had seen. I actually found this second story later on almost by accident. I was asking Mum to recount the experience with the Victorian people outside the mill, and my dad chipped in with something like, "Oh, and what about the ghost you saw on the milk round as a kid?" He obviously put his foot in it, and she suddenly seemed defensive and scolded him, telling him to be quiet about it. Naturally, I forced her to tell this story, but when she did, she seemed very reluctant to tell it, claiming it was just stupid. But I can tell that perhaps it frightened her as a child, and she doesn't really like to bring it back up, I guess. Thank you to Greg for sending in his mum's experiences. It sounds like your mum is naturally spiritually gifted. Also, I cannot get the image of those Victorian children with the brown teeth out of my mind. Thank you for that. If you have your own paranormal experience that you'd like me to narrate on the show, you can send it to scaryaparanormalpodcast@gmail.com, and it just might get made into a future episode. And finally, I just want to say a huge thank you to all those people who have wrote 5-star reviews about the show recently. We got another little burst of them, and reading them gives me great joy. Have a great week. Keep an eye out for the new Patreon episode, which will be dropping this weekend. And other than that, join me next time for another episode of Scary.
You've worked hard since you arrived in the city, gained loads of experience, developed your skills. Everywhere you look, you see something you helped build. But now, you're looking to the future, and maybe you're thinking about where you come from. In Ireland, we need planners, carpenters, plumbers, roofers, engineers, architects, site managers, and more. We need you, with all your skills and knowledge, to help us build thousands of homes. You've built the world. Now come back and build the home that built you. For more information, visit gov.ie/Building Ireland. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
You've worked hard since you arrived in the city, gained loads of experience, developed your skills. Everywhere you look, you see something you helped build. But now, you're looking to the future, and maybe you're thinking about where you come from. In Ireland, we need planners, carpenters, plumbers, roofers, engineers, architects, site managers, and more. We need you, with all your skills and knowledge, to help us build thousands of homes. You've built the world. Now come back and build the home that built you. For more information, visit gov.ie/Building Ireland. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.